All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the writing was on the wall that the Los Angeles Chargers were going to have to move on from head coach Brandon Staley, and that day has finally come. Staley's fate was sealed last night as the Chargers were embarrassed by the Las Vegas Raiders. Almost said Los Angeles Raiders because they were the Los Angeles Raiders once upon a time. But nonetheless, they were embarrassed by the Las Vegas Raiders 63 to 21. What made it worse was that the Chargers simply didn't compete last night as they surrendered a franchise worst 63 points while also allowing the Raiders to score a franchise best for them 63 points, obviously. Now, you can look at this a lot of different ways, but this was the same Raiders team that at home lost to the Minnesota Vikings 3-0 this past Sunday. All right. And for them to turn around and do what they did to the Chargers last night was simply mind-boggling. The Chargers didn't compete, and I cannot say this enough. And that right there falls at the feet of your head coach and Brandon Staley. This team gave up on Brandon Staley. They quit on him. And if you're Dean Spanos, you had no choice but to do what you did last night. Now, it's one of those, I said it from last year in the playoffs, and I'm going to say it again. I said it all season long. Brandon Staley needed to go when the Chargers blew that 27-point lead in a wild card round in January to Jacksonville. I said then he needed to go. I said typically when you have scenarios like that, they carry over to those teams for the following season, and they're never the same. This Chargers team under Brandon Staley was never the same following that loss last year to Jacksonville. And it's one of those where the house cleaning did not stop for the Chargers there, as the Lightning Bolts also let go general manager Tom Telesco, who has been with the team since 2013, as he was relieved of his duties this morning as well. So I will pose the question to anybody out there. Does the fact that the Chargers now have both a head coaching and general manager vacancy clear the way for them to go out there and make a run at New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick? There have been rumors about the Chargers possibly, linking up with Belichick for next season if the Patriots are ready to move on from him. And I think that the divorce between Belichick and Patriots team owner Robert Kraft is imminent. And honestly, the writing's on the wall there as well. And if the Chargers do truly want Bill Belichick in their fold, it's going to cost them financially because he's going to have to be one of, if not the highest paid coaches in the National Football League. On top of that, the Chargers, hypothetically speaking, of course, would have to give the Patriots some type of compensation, most likely draft picks. So on top of that, Belichick is definitely going to want to have a say in personnel decisions. Let's not forget, Belichick has been the de facto general manager for the New England Patriots for quite some time now. So all of those factoring in, would the Chargers do this? And I think it's a possibility, and I'll touch on that in a minute because you look at this Chargers team, and again, I cannot harp on enough the fact that they didn't compete last night. They were down 21 to nothing in after the first quarter. And that's hard to do in the National Football League. What's even harder to do is be down 42 to nothing at halftime, because what can you say to your team if you're down 42 to nothing? Because obviously whatever game plan you had didn't work. But aside from being down 42 to nothing, it was the fact that this team quit. You look at it, you look at the interception that Jack Jones had to begin the fourth quarter. He ran that route better than Austin Eckler. He knew it was coming before the Easton Stick, who was the Chargers starting quarterback, even hiked the football. He was there. He ran it so well that he almost overran the play in picking it off. And at that point, it was 56-7 Raiders. And then they went on, obviously, to score right there to make it 63-7. You look at the John Jenkins fumble, the 44-yard touchdown scramble, if you want to call it that, to end the third quarter to put the Raiders up 56-7. Nobody chased him down. And you got a big fella, well over 300 pounds. Nobody was even in his vicinity. It was all black jerseys. The Chargers offensive line, they didn't try. And typically, when you got a big fella like that, obviously he wasn't moving that fast. Typically, you'd see a wide receiver, you'd see a running back, you'd see somebody come into the picture trying to go out there and make a tackle. None of that was happening. That obviously, is going to have to change for this team. But, it's sad because obviously the excuse is going to be, well, we didn't have Justin Herbert. The Chargers didn't have Justin Herbert. I get it. But, the Raiders are out there with a rookie quarterback and Aiden O'Connell. The Raiders are out there with an interim head coach and Antonio Pierce, who is trying to get a job. At this point of the season, everybody around the National Football League is dealing with injuries. You look at the Cleveland Browns, they're going out there fighting, scrapping, and clawing for Kevin Stefanski. The same thing can be said for the Cincinnati Bengals, the Indianapolis Colts, the Minnesota Vikings. So many teams right down the list have injuries, but they are competing. The Chargers simply stopped competing. And Dean Spanos had absolutely no choice to do what he did following last night's game. So I look at it like this. The question is going to be what's next for the Chargers? They need some semblance of order. And it's one of those where it's easier said than done because the Chargers continue to be the Chargers. And it's been like this for decades. The Chargers have talent. The Chargers will amass multiple star players on their team, but they simply do not win. I mean, you look at it over the years, even obviously clearly dating back to their time in San Diego, the Chargers have sent their fair share of Hall of Famers to Canton, but it still has not resulted in a Super Bowl championship. You look at this team this year, they were loaded, especially on defense. They went out there and spent the money on JC Jackson from the Patriots. Didn't work out. You have Joey Bosa, who's obviously injured right now. You brought in Khalil Mack. You have Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr. It's a who's who of notable players on this team. The run game has not been there, of course, but you got Keenan Allen, the wide receiver, of course, Justin Herbert. And when it's all said and done, you're 5-9, and you're going to be watching the playoffs from home. So this right here is going to be an interesting telltale for Dean Spanos and the Chargers this offseason. I say this because Dean Spanos could get away with being an afterthought in San Diego. It's a little bit different in LA because I'm not even what I'm about to say. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just being real from what I see. It's one of those scenarios where if you didn't put on the game and watch, you wouldn't know the Chargers were from LA. And I say that because nobody talks about them. They don't have that feel. There's nothing there. There's nothing expected of them. Obviously, clearly, just like the Rams, when they have their home games at SoFi, you get a lot of fans from the opposing team coming there. But nonetheless, the Rams do have, some type of foothold in Los Angeles. They also won a Super Bowl championship a couple of years ago. The Chargers are an afterthought. And of course, they're a big time afterthought in LA right now. The NBA season is going on. People are talking about the Lakers. The Dodgers just signed Shohei Ohtani. And, the Rams, even though they're under 500 right now, they still have a shot to make the postseason. We can't say that about the Chargers. They're just an afterthought. But it's easier to fly under the radar if you're San Diego as opposed to Los Angeles. So I think right now the ball is in Dean Spanos' court. What does he want his team to be? What does he want, to put around Justin Herbert, who is the face of his franchise right now? Are you going to go out there and make that splash to get a guy like Bill Belichick. And it's going to be very interesting. It's very tough because, again, the Chargers are going to have to give the Patriots some draft compensation and money if they want Belichick, and they still got to turn around and pay Belichick. Sean Payton just cost the Denver Broncos a one, okay, to get him from New Orleans because he was under contract. That's a guy who only has one Super Bowl championship on his resume. What's it going to take to get a guy like Bill Belichick? And the thing is this: if you're the Chargers, you're 5-9 right now. You're staring at a very real possibility of picking in the top 10 of this upcoming NFL draft. Do you want to give up a top 10 pick to go out there and give Bill Belichick when your team clearly has some holes in it? We got to wait and see. But nonetheless, changes have to be made with the Chargers. Obviously, clearly, the first change was made to give Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco their respective pink slips today. But that's just one part of the equation. How are you going to improve this team? Okay, you can't just sit up there and focus on an analytics guy who has the look, who came from a good coaching tree under Sean McVay with the Rams. He was just the right guy in the right place at the right time, being the defensive coordinator for the Rams when they had Jalen Ramsey, when they had Aaron Donald. He was the right guy in the right place at the right time when he was the outside linebackers coach for the Bears when they had Khalil Mack and Leonard Floyd. He was the right guy in the right place in the right time when he was the outside linebackers coach for the Denver Broncos when they had Von Miller. All of that is fine, but the bottom line is, can a guy coach? Can he be a motivator of men? You got to get somebody who's not going to focus so much on analytics. I know analytics is like the rave right now in sports, but you got to go out there and use your common darn sense. Number one, on a hire, and find a head coach who's going to use the common sense, use the X's and O's, motivate his team, and more importantly, help you get the wins. Brandon Staley did not give the Chargers a lot of that. And that is a big reason why he's fired. That is a big reason why this team has a losing record. That is a big reason why this team continues to underachieve. And this is why this team is looking like they are just off the rails, if you will. So this is an important offseason for the Chargers. Dean Spanos and company got the jump. They got to get a GM first and then a head coach, or maybe just maybe they're willing to roll the dice, push all of their chips to the table, make that call to New England, go out there and get Bill Belichick and try to see if he can turn things around for one of the bigger disappointments in the NFL. Only time will tell, but what happened today to Brandon Staley had to be made. You can't give up 63 points. You can't lose by 42 points. You can't have your team not compete and expect to remain as a head coach in the National Football League. Nothing personal, but it's simply the nature of the business. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.